Okay. A few announcements. One is audio. We had a bit of discussion on the subject on the group also, but I found a lot of members, not just one or two, are seriously interested in the audio portion at least. Rameshan took the trouble to call me this morning from US just say, for heaven's sake, somehow get me the audio. And he's going to call me on my phone today to join the meeting. Prem from US, she has sent me a message, big long message saying, somehow get me the audio. And today Prema. Oh. So I can understand the demand for audio, and our friend has solved it. What more do you want? Our friend has solved it, see? So we have a solution. Hope it works. Then the other thing is about our March and April books. February book is there. Already we are a little late in the election. So election starts now. The nomination at least starts now. March and April books. We are already late. February we have got. Yeah, but people want to buy a month in advance, no? And sometimes the books are a little difficult to get and all that. So election, the nomination starts now. Say, I'll be officially posting the mail as soon as the meeting is over, as soon as I go home. Say till 3rd January also. I usually give a week for people to do some research and then nominate the books and all that. Till 3rd February, let us say. And then immediately we'll have our election. So by about 7th, 8th, 10th February, we'll get our book, enough time to buy it and all that. That sort of a thing. And then other than that, we don't have any major pending issues. Thanks, Nitya. So, hello, please come. Welcome.
Just coming. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hello.
Alapu, did you pick up some diamonds on the way? It's just there the next
So I came last night, I saw them, I said, wow.
That's what I said, wow.
I said, wow. That's all. I don't need diamonds anymore. And they're much beyond anybody's reach in Chennai, by the way. It's huge.
okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Was it okay?
I have so little to say, so it doesn't matter really.
Your voice has been recorded.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Hopefully. That's part of the meeting.
Okay, Suresh, sorry, what is the book for there?
Book for?
Civility? Sorry.
Rules of civility. Rules of civility.
Okay.
So, now about today's book.
Okay.
I have little to say because I know all of you have a lot to say about it, so I'm not going to say much.
Please say.
Just, okay.
How did you arrive at those points that you put on the poster?
I searched
It's
all over.
Oh, it's on your Google, those points.
Yeah. I got it.
I thought these are the things that you had pondered on. As
No, actually I took the trouble. I wrote about 8 points and then I found this. I said all 8 are there and little more. I said quietly copy it.
Where did this one come?
Yeah. After a lot of trouble. If I had seen this first, I would have saved it half a day's work.
It's all over there.
All over. No, I do a lot of searching before I create my card. A lot of research is needed. Like the pictures, for example. I have to search a lot of places to get them. So, one beautifully written book. That is the first feeling you get when you are reading the book. Beautifully written. It's not fiction. And he didn't handle it for sensationalization. It's very clinical, very professional, the way he handled it. Underplayed, in fact, to a certain extent, I would say. To really get this point across, the psychology point across. Not the hardship, not the story. In fact, the subject was psychology, not the camp. That is the way he handled the book and handled it beautifully. That is one thing I noticed. Second, first half went breeze through, I tell you. Enjoyed it also. So you can imagine enjoying a book about this sort of a subject, but we did. You imagine enjoying the book on this subject.
Down in 2 days you read it.
Yeah.
So fast.
And then block. The second half started, plow through, everything. You read about 2 pages, you say, good. You seem to understand. Next page you read, confusion starts. Next page you read, you are black to normal. You really don't know what's happening. So I think I got it, but I'm not sure. That is the feeling you get after 3-4 pages. And this keeps on happening for every point. In my case at least, I feel I should have understood everything at some stage and then forgotten, God knows why. And then I found at least 2-3 others I talked with, they all have the same problem. Sundari said she's got the same problem. While reading it, she felt she understood it, and little later she felt she didn't. At least I did. Then I have an expert in the family, psychology expert. When I mentioned Frankl, she said immediately logotherapy. My granddaughter thought she's doing psychology in post-graduation. So I asked her. They said, there's so much to say about him. I can't talk on phone. When I come to Chennai, I'll talk to you. So that sort of a thing. So she claims this subject is one actually branch of psychology itself. It's not just a small thing. It's something very, 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 very big. He is there with Ford and others. Not somebody small. It's that big, and that's sort of a school of psychology itself. To that extent, he has created something, and automatically that means some people follow, some psychologists don't follow. That was her story. And she says today quite a few people are not fully following it. That was her small interaction with me, and she says she has so much more to talk about it. She'll tell me when she comes to Chennai. So we are having a book written by a psychologist, the way a psychologist should approach the problem. That is why I liked it so much. Even though the second half was very slow going for me, until now I feel there is so much I am missing. But so much I seem to understand but really don't. That is something I really am waiting for others' reaction to understand today. Then, please come.
You sit there.
So,
Closer to
okay. Then there are a lot of statements. You just mentioned how you got those list of statements. Same way. Lot of things in the book, lot of lines you just pause. The moment you read it, you pause. I said, wow. I'm just mentioning 2-3 of them because I want the floor open for that. What caught me most, I'd say, the most important according to me, the statement was Nietzsche's statement, which he quoted. He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. It really got me. Then of course, we did a lot of things. It did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Things like this. And then he went close to Mahatma Gandhi. No one has a right to do wrong, even if a wrong has been done to him. I'm just mentioning 2 or 3 things because I found they affected me throughout my life. I had a checkered history that way in my business career, and all these things I have faced. So I can really relate to what he has been saying. So it's a book, something really caught me. I think it's one of the best books we have read in the book club. To that extent, I liked it.
very powerful book.
Very powerful.
Who's next? I will go next.
I can go because I'm not going to talk really on all what you're going to talk. I just want to tell you,
One minute.
Must I? Yes. Now we heard. I have such a loud voice.
It doesn't matter. Manishan is sitting in America and he wants to hear you.
But he's not been able to get through. I don't know why.
So this turn around and yell.
Yes. When somebody gives you an opportunity, this is meant to like, got an opportunity
Oh, okay.
Not clipping.
Now I just have to talk.
Take off.
So, I'm really not going to be talking about all what's in the book because I know everybody has read it and I think you've all understood it, or hopefully, but lots will also talk. But as a personal experience, this book brought back so much memories of me walking through a concentration camp just outside Berlin and seeing everything that he spoke about. And even, it is a terrible, terrible feeling. I went with my husband and a German couple, and they decided they'll stay in the coffee shop. You take whatever time you want. They didn't want to go through because it is an amazingly, very deeply sad feeling that you go through, especially in the rooms when you see the toilets, little pots that are put close to each other. At least this had the others. I mean, a lot of places just they were lying on straw and urinating and things. So they suffered too much. And then there was even the room where they killed the people with shot. Truly, when I walked into it, I truly felt there was almost that's such an eerie feeling of a presence, probably his life or what it was where they were killed. And then there were the gas chambers, and the torture that he talks about is so, when we have gone through it, you really feel all what he has said. So I thought this book brought me back to that trip and went through all that. And the other thing, there are so many things that you can talk about. It's just wonderful, the book. And I have learned, you can pick up and take away so much. But the other thing I really was, and on a more humorous point, 3 days ago I was watching, after having read the book, I was watching RRR, okay? And there's a scene of Ram Charan. I think, have you all known the book? No. Anyway, he is going through the fiercest battle where there's all fire around him and everything. And the vision that, he's thinking, how am I going to do it? But he does it. And what shots came right in front of him? One of Sita, the person he left behind his love. 2, the promise he took when he left the island, that this was my goal. I am going to see that every person will have a gun on this land. And the suffering that came about was all that he was going through fire. He was going through everything. So this was what logotherapy was. It suddenly struck me that this is logotherapy that he had just shown on this. So I thought it was an amazingly beautifully written book, very real. As Suresh said, there's nothing unreal about it. He wrote it from his heart. This is what I went through. He didn't want, it wasn't as if, as he said, he wasn't going to make a sensation or anything. This is what it was. So I was so impressed by the author about his learning, but I also felt that everything that is in this book has also been written in the Yoga Sutra 5,000 years ago. And we all know that deeply when you have studied it, and one of your first lessons tells you that all of Western psychology finds its home over here. Whether it was Maslow's self-actualization, or it was Alder's pursuit of power, or it was Freud's pursuit of pleasure. All these things are, and even his analogy of taking one cinema screen to the next, each piece, that is also in the sutra, that you take scene by scene, part by part of your life. So it's so, for me it was a flashback of all what I've studied, all what I've experienced. So it was truly a wonderful book. And I'm not going to say anything about the writing because I know everybody has so much to say. Okay? Thank you.
You pass the mic on.
Mic now.
Ramesh was online.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to say anything. He has not completed the code. But he would like the audio file to be sent to him later.
Right.
1 minute, Lakshmi. One other point I want to make is in yoga, your first class, when you're studying the theory of yoga, they say the purpose of yoga is to find a goal. Yes, to find a goal and to work towards that. And then you take the Ashtanga path towards it. Your goal can be moksha, it can be dancing, it can be anything. But you find it because you need to find that perfection and merge with it. So it is an amazingly, for me to have read this book, it was amazing side by side. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have the pleasure of reading Prem Kishore's reflection on this. It's not exactly a review, it's more of a reflection, as she says at the end. Los Angeles, the city in which I live, has the largest Holocaust museum in America. 72 years ago, Holocaust survivors came together to found this museum that stores many artifacts and archival material of a brutal, terrifying part of history. I have never visited this museum. I always felt that it would be too harrowing. And now I have started reading the book by Viktor Frankl, thanks to the voters of our group. I could not read it in detail as I was busy with family visiting me, but this is what I took away. Grief, horror, courage, resilience, fear, and shock. Physically disabled, sent to death. A madness that cannot be analyzed. Primitive greed, and at the end of it all, it becomes a humbling experience. Despite the mind being ravaged by nightmarish scenarios, there was still hope, optimism, the belief that what does not kill you makes you stronger. A resolution that what took place then does not happen again. The terrible, horrific fact is that it is happening. We see anti-Semitism, racism, fear of immigrants, religious persecution, hate crimes. The book has sold in millions and translated into 24 languages. Have we learned anything? In LA, Nazi salutes are common during protests. Anti-Semitic banners are displayed often, and flyers stuffed in bags are found on lawns throughout the city. Incidents of hate are to be found in private and public schools. I was excited to know that the international bestseller, Man's Search for Meaning, is adapted for young readers. Last year, there were 400 anti-Semitic incidents in my city. This is not a book review as much as a scary reflection of the times we live in, and I intend to visit the Holocaust Museum.
Amazing. Which is so true of today.
I can work with that. I agree with her totally.
Totally.
We have not learned it.
We haven't learned it.
Someone else can read, and then my voice has already been recorded.
No, it's okay. That is her fault. Yeah,
It's your turn. Your turn.
Somebody do it, and then I'll do it. Okay.
You have the mic on you. Why go to the...
Sorry, I need to look for my specs. Right, my dilemma is that I wrote what I understood of logotherapy, the second part of it. I liked the first part very much. Yes, it was easy reading, but no, thank you. I suppose, I think we're all going to say somewhat the same thing about the first part, so I could easily skip that. In 1993, I beg your pardon, Viktor Frankl, 1932, director of neurological department of Rothschild Hospital. 10 years later, 1942, deported to a concentration camp with his family. While struggling to survive, he developed, through observation and experiences, the theory of logotherapy, that through a search for meaning in life, people can endure and overcome suffering. Logotherapy means therapy through meaning. Humans have a desire to seek and make meaning of life. The fact that when Frankl died, 10 million books were sold in 1997 shows that a lot of people are searching for meaning of life, right? Logos means meaning. Finding meaning is the primary motivation for living. This is nothing to do with me. I'm giving what Viktor Frankl has said. Finding meaning is the primary motive for living. And that meaning is unique to each person, and only that person can fulfill it. This meaning can be realized by engaging with the world, and not only through self-reflection. So my mother's theory of leaving us all and going to the Himalayas does not work. The challenge to fulfill this meaning gives us purpose. So logotherapy focuses on the future. The primary motivational force in man is this: I have to find purpose for my future. In this, he deviates from the father of psychology, Freud, who focused on happiness as the aim. Will to pleasure, Freud says, versus Frankl's will to meaning. When this will to meaning is blocked or absent, it leads to existential frustration. I quote Frankl. In Frankl's case, the deep desire to publish his manuscript helped him to survive the rigors of Auschwitz. He prophesies about the future and the importance to have a purpose. Frankl speaks of an existential vacuum in the 20th century. We saw that, we still see it. What is that? That is boredom. Another problem that we face from the 20th century onwards is progressive automation, which increases leisure time. People will not know what to do with this time. At such time, the will to meaning gets compensated by the will to power, the will to consume, the will for pleasure, and the will for money. We have all seen that. It also leads to the increase in social and sexual deviance. We read about it. Moreover, he says one should not search for an abstract meaning in life. This for me was this sentence stood out to me. Situations and circumstances differ between people and even in the same person at different times. So man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but what he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. In other words, how can I respond responsibly to any given situation in my life at any given time? This is the key point for Frankl. It can be discovered in three ways: by creating a work or by doing a great deed, self-explanatory, needs no explanation. Secondly, by experiencing something or encountering someone. And the third is by the attitude we take towards suffering. So the second point of finding meaning by experiencing goodness, truth, beauty, nature, culture, arts, and perhaps at its highest, experiencing another human being and loving him or her. We saw this, didn't we, during the pandemic when everybody started adopting pets. He expands on love beautifully on page 116. I would really request you to read page 116.
Very nice.
Point 3, finding meaning through suffering. For what matters then is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to change ourselves when we can't change a situation. In very short words, to change our attitude. Page 119 gives a moving account of how he lost everything, especially his manuscript, which he calls his mental child. And in the worn-out coat of a dead victim, he sees a scrap of paper with Shema Yisrael, the most important Jewish prayer, and he took it as a challenge to lead out his life. Now, logotherapy as a technique, I promise you this isn't long anymore. Logotherapy as a technique, the treatment that is dealt. The first is, if there is a neurosis in a person, to de-reflect the neurosis. If a person comes with a neurosis of anxiety, to do hyper-anxiety and de-reflect it from that person. The second is paradoxical intention. When you exaggerate a phobia instead of hiding and denying it. Example, sleeplessness. You want to sleep and you can't sleep. So Frankl would tell you, please don't sleep for the next 3 nights and days. Okay, that's something like what he would do. The third one is using the Socratic dialogue, which I frankly do not really understand, I'm just quoting it. The Socratic dialogue, which allows the client to realize they already have the answer to their purpose, message, and freedom, which I suppose goes into spirituality. Frankl concludes with man's capability of changing the world for the better, it is possible, and of changing himself for the better if necessary. He gives an example of Dr. J, the mass murderer of Steinhof, who did atrocities in his euthanasia program. This same man was imprisoned in the dreaded Lubyanka prison, and the same man was a source of great comfort to his fellow prisoners. And this I understand because a man who was so committed to his mission for euthanasia that he did terrible torturous things to his victims now had the mission of comfort. If you're good at something, you will be good at that also. You just have to find the right purpose. And so he recommends that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by the Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast.
Very well. Thank you.
Very well.
I think Lakshmi has taken it all. I have a question to ask you. You mentioned in the WhatsApp group that if somebody could explain to me about the second half, I thought you've done it.
You've done it.
Today.
Yeah. So you've answered yourself.
But that happened today.
But you've read it, so you should have understood while you were reading.
Not necessarily.
No.
At the end of it, only today you
I understood it.
He's been reflecting on it.
Exactly. I did it. They saw me. In fact, they were there. They saw me writing on it without looking at the text.
I just want is that okay? Sure. Because I just want to add to what Lakshmi said. I'm not good at clipping, so I'll hold it in my hand. Okay. So, Lakshmi, you've taken away most of the things that I've said. I did not read the first half of the book because, frankly, I just wanted to know what he meant by man's search for meaning. And we have documented enough about the Holocaust. And I also, this book on the Trevor Noah wrote, I don't know why, it impacted me a lot. He says, we talk so much about the Holocaust, but what the colonials did in different parts of the world, it was not documented, but it was equally horrific or more. So after that, I somehow feel, I don't know, I didn't feel it is necessary to read the first. It was about, okay, it's a man's...
Devika, you're wrong. Because this man, being a psychiatrist, it's his subject, he has understood the problem completely, and he has written it not in a fancy way. He's written it as it is. So it is worth reading. It's not like any of the other Holocaust books that you read, very dramatic and all that. Actually, it wasn't dramatic enough to me for what I felt.
Okay. I'll pass. Yeah, I get it. No. So I didn't read it for these reasons that I've just mentioned, but I'm open to reading it now. But I found the second half of the book absolutely precious, reverential, I would say, because this is something I keep pondering on. What is our meaning in our existence? What is the meaning? I didn't know that the Yoga Sutra, that Alagu is today's takeaway for me, that the Yoga Sutras have been talking about the same thing. But this concept of the search for meaning as against the search for power, money, or pleasure has always been something that has been there and I've been dwelling on. So this was great for me, and I just must add that I always feel, because I live partly in the UK and partly here, at least of recent times, I always feel I get my meaning only when I'm back here. Because when I go and look out of my window and I see how privileged and entitled I am, I get my search. I don't need to search for meaning at all. It's there. It's right there with me. So that's all I wanted to say. Anyone else? Latika, you can?
Who is
Gita? I'm not saying. You, unless you're a negative view. It's not a negative.
That's not mine.
Okay, folks, this is my take on this whole episode, where we are admiring the man for what he's done. He's what we say, walk the walk and done it. He's done it. He's gone. He's gone through these horrors, not of his own making, right? He volunteered to go in. He volunteered to go in because his parents or whatever. He went in, so he need not have gone there.
And because of his conscience.
Of his conscience, he thought he will do it. Obviously, like the banner says, you work for hope or something.
Yeah.
So all his contemporaries went into the camps those days for hope. They never knew they'll be gassed. You must remember that. Many intellectuals first went. Some intellectuals fled. He had an opportunity to flee. He still went because he thought his father was on the hit list or something. I don't know for sure, but I think his mom died in a camp. But that's besides the point. The man went there to a place where he had an option of leaving, so he had this loyalty. That shows his character. So there's no fault of him at all. What I said is, what I'm trying to say, that he was a product of his times, and his times are not our times. What has he taught us? Anyone above 50, he's taught us a lot. Anyone less than 50, 20, zilch. So this is what Holocaust, last 2 years ago, I went for the Motherlode of Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. Heaps of people. Lots of school kids coming on tours. All of them were playing Nintendo games, blah, blah. Jewish kids, not bothered. The teachers are screaming at them. No. Because it's they couldn't really scream because it's supposed to be a very hallowed thing. Here we were tourists. I was interested. The rest of my tour bunch, least bit interested. See, this is what's happening now, 21st century. Let's see, go back to 46, 45. You see, America got everything. America got Werner von Braun, Nazis, and they got refugees. Guys lived side by side. Guys who were gassing people were living in New York along with heaps of things. So the whole life meaning had been lost to these people who had done the hard yakka. They walked the walk. They come as refugees. Most of them went to Israel, of course, and they were turned back. The British were bad people. They even sank ships and machine gunned some people who were trying to go to their homeland. The Americans were playing Big Brother and giving visas to everybody. They gave everybody. SS guards were going. And this is not fair. The meaning of life died. If this man had written the book he wrote in 59. If he had written the book in 46, it would have made no sense. It made no sense to these people who suffered. We never suffered. We are so far removed. Probably you are far removed. I'm not that removed because I had a Jewish boss. And he was a bluffer.
He was
a bluffer. He was an exaggerator. He exaggerated about all this. I went to the camp. What do you know? I'll never buy a German car in my life. And he had 14 German cars. These are the double standards which successful Jews constantly exhibit in a society, in a Western society, and they're despised for it. Neo-Nazism is at its heights in Australia only because of the apathy. The public apathy. So this book, people will read it, and it reads like fiction. The first part, the second part, it might relate to us if we want to improve our life. But do kids want? A person, when you write a non-fiction, I feel it should be read for years, not only for your contemporaries. Kids, you should always think of the future, not like Greta Thunberg thinking of save the trees, save the planet, you guys have ruined it, what about us? Not in that way. Just for your contemporaries and their children. I'll read it, you'll read it, my child will not read it. And how is she ever going to do logotherapy, which is right? And this author himself says that when Freud wrote his book on his particular psychology, he did it in a Victorian splendor. Whereas this man did it on the bench of a concentration camp. So he always makes a comparison. You have to walk the walk before you talk the talk. So he's probably in my take is that I might be alone in this. His book, the instant he wrote it was not relevant because anti-Semitism is alive and well and worse. And today I can count 9 European governments in the last 3 years who have gone right-wing, far right-wing. Right-wing means they'll do Hitlerian things to subdue certain portions of their community to get might is right, God is, right, we are right. The left is all gone. So what did this man teach Europeans? And another big fault of his is, no fault of his, like all the Jews went to America, like I said, a lot of them. Unfortunately, all his scholarship went to America too. He went to Harvard, he was a visiting professor at Princeton, everywhere. And it's completely lost. Do Americans learn anything from what logotherapy? There are individuals, even amongst us, we claim to know or understand. We might know, we even might walk the walk, but we are not aware. There's good in all of us. So we might be adhering to his second part. But we don't have to read an older book. The man is dead and gone, okay? He has left no impact. Today, I'm in about 3 Holocaust groups. I Googled Frankl. His book is not relevant. You know what's relevant? what other lesser people who have gone through the horrors, but they are relevant because people prefer to read experiences, not to be told to do this or suggested. You don't suggest. It's like kids teaching kids today. You can't even suggest that we had good old days. You see, the same thing comes. So unfortunately,
there's a little thing that I disagree with you.
no, I'm not. I'm finished, more or less. See, what I said is, it's a singular view, only because I grew up in a Jewish environment. My boss, I told you, he used to blah. But I had some Jews, younger Jews, who had no care because they all liked their hair normal. Hasidic Jews are supposed to wear some, they look clownish. So in Australia itself, many Hasidic Jews don't like wearing they call it Jewish parda, as they call it, because they have to wear a hat and they have to wear a jindu or something, a plaid or something, and they get teased by everybody, even ever since kids. So there are no really Orthodox Jews. But I grew up in that area. In fact, my daughter still lives there. Last year I met some of my Jewish friends. The Holocaust Museum is also there, the Australian Sydney chapter is the Holocaust. Absolutely, I'm the only audience sometimes. And Australia now uses this new term, the youngsters use, don't know, don't care. These are 4 words, don't know, don't care. So if you tell them, if you teach them, they'll not listen. They'll write, they'll ace the exams. Come on, Purva, you're the youngest here. Come on, tell me. I mean, you might be an intellectual type.
We have very different experiences.
Whatever, correct.
Yeah. We have very different experiences of the younger generation. At least from what I have seen, again, I would like one comment about we have very different experiences of the younger generation, because at least in my experience, it's been people younger, my age or younger than me, and I can't speak to Australia. My Australian family, I've maybe seen them 2 times in 30 years. My experience is more in India and the United States, and I can tell you for a fact that the only people who do give a damn are my age and younger, because honestly it's my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation who quite frankly have screwed the world up and left us holding the bag. If we're going to be making generalizations, if we're going to be making generational generalizations over here for a minute, and so I am sorry that those were the caliber of young people you encountered, but I have absolutely not found that to be true. I mean, the reason the United States is not in the hands of a fascist sentient pile of orange ooze is that young people showed up. People, 10, 15 years younger than me, despite the fact that they have had some of the worst times of any generation growing up since the post World War II boom, right? Since they have had, I think, 3 recessions, 20 years of war, God knows what. They showed up and they saved the United States. It wasn't the old generation who cared. It was them. But coming back to this book, yes, he's a good writer, but I have 2 issues with him. One is I think that this book was less a Holocaust memoir and more a marketing tool for logotherapy. I did not. It felt like a self-help book in the guise of a Holocaust memoir, which would be my first criticism. My second criticism is that I'm sorry, I do not believe in this prosperity gospel nonsense of just because if I think positive, I will survive. I presume that the 6 million people who died, did they somehow not think positive enough? I mean, okay, perhaps he decided, okay, I survived this, therefore I am going to explain why I survived and better people than me did not. Therefore, I will say that I survived because of this thing I did, not random chance. It's yet more of the just world fallacy. Frankl, in my opinion, is not looking for meaning. Well, he is looking for meaning, but the meaning he is looking for is, why did I survive when my father did not? Why did I survive when better people than me did not? Yeah, to me, he's just trying to make sense of something that honestly is insensible. The world doesn't make sense. The world is awful, and I think this was his effort at trying to explain why me, why did I survive. So I know. I mean, is it a good memoir? I don't think so. And honestly, I think part of why it has gotten so much success is, again, it falls into the just world therapy. I survived because I did X.
That is not my takeaway.
No, I mean, again, that was my personal,
Each person's takeaway.
Yeah. But yeah, no, just to say that, no, the world is not going to hell in a handbasket, and things are a lot better than they were 100 years ago.
So you think it's because he lucked out?
Yes, I do. Do I think that there was a huge amount of luck to it? Yes. Do I think that his the psychology of it was part of it? Yes. But what I think my issue is, in fairness, part of it is part of my irritation with books of these kind is we place all the focus and all the burden on the individual. We do not take into account systemic racism, systemic barriers, systemic none of it. We say that, okay, if you are mentally strong enough, you can survive this. It's the same damn thing with COVID. It's the same damn thing with, that you tell any marginalized group, if you just do X and Y, you will survive. I mean, again, I don't blame the guy. He was looking for, he was looking to explain something that does not have any explanation. I don't blame him for writing what he went through, but I think what this book does is it plays into a pre-existing idea, especially in American Christianity, that if you are just good enough, God will save you.
I have one point to say. I don't think he ever used the prosperity gospel theory at all. No. He doesn't use the positive part. No. He doesn't, okay? He says it's a shitty world, and you face the shitty world, but get your attitude in shape, because that's all you can do in the circumstances. That's right. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing, yours, why it does have value today is 2014, 2015, we had the Uyghur massacre. We had the Rwanda genocide. Okay, do we want this to happen again? So it is relevant from that point of view that we don't learn from our history. That's all. Yeah.
We first do a round of what everyone says, and then we go into...
Okay, I don't really have much more to say than what all of you have already said. Like Alugu, I've been to Auschwitz, so I can... I can repeat the whole thing. Everything he's described, I've seen. And also, it's... over there, when you're in that camp and you go around the place, it really hits you what you're seeing. And the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem it doesn't affect you the way Auschwitz does. It just doesn't. And actually, I thought I was a very hardened person, because I could see everybody going around feeling extremely, it's like you just want to turn away, you don't want to see it. But the room that really brought home what everything was a room where you just saw thousands of what you thought was wigs, but actually it's the scalp.
Oh my gosh.
That was...
Doesn't it make you think, did it really happen?
No, it did. But Teju, there's another part to it. See, like Devika mentioned, and I think this is very, very important, so many people have recorded what happened in the German concentration camps. How many people have actually recorded what happened in Australia, what happened to the Native American, what happened to the entire South American thing? And even us, there's a little bit of record, but over there's no record. Can you imagine that South America, the language is either Spanish or it is Portuguese? But they had their own languages which had just gone somewhere, wiped out. So there it was a question of the word, I think, is assimilation.
Yes. Assimilation. Yeah.
Which is coterminous with annihilation. The way it was done. You know, how you kill a culture, how you kill something. So in this, there is lots written about it. I don't say that, you know, these guys really did suffer, etc. But the part of his entire thing that quite fascinated me was the disillusionment he talks about after the apathy and the shock, apathy and disillusionment. And he describes the field where they walk through and things like that. And somehow, what is the disillusionment you get? Is it that your dream hasn't come true? He says sometimes when the guy goes home and doesn't find the person who should be there to be there and things like that. But in all our lives, what we dream of sometimes, does it happen exactly like that? Or are we happy that it happens in some way which comes round to what we've dreamt of? You know, so that was one part. I wondered whether I really would like to read more on that disillusionment scene. But the rest of it, I agree with all of you that there's lots. I mean, it's a textbook for any student of psychology. So that's very much No, may not be the mainstream. See, it's even people who counsel, you know, you're counseling. I think Surekha can speak lots about that. There's a lot you can pick out of it. And
his positiveness. Like, you like that one couple who gave him some bread.
who gave him a piece of bread.
And he writes in the first chapter, he writes that capos were normally the worst people, but we had one nice one. He's always had the positive aspect. That I admired, man. That was his.
No, I think this brings out also, I mean, even that Dr. J, the description of that, it says, however horrible you are, there must be a nice side to you also.
Yeah,
you know,
those are the takeaways I got.
No, like let's take something nearer home for all of us. We had good old Veerappan. I mean, Veerappan, the kind of massacre he did of people he didn't like was horrible. I mean, it was really awful. But then there's the other side of him being the Robin Hood part also. Yeah. You know, so there's the good and the bad in all of us. I think somehow that must be the point which saves the whole world.
Society spoils it, isn't it? We become normal for society. In our own cocoon, we become our true self.
So, after listening to all of you, and I admit I haven't read the whole book, but when I heard all of you, it did strike me that, you know, when you talk about a Holocaust, I think we talk about the inner, what he actually meant was his own inner Holocaust, and what his experiences were. So when you were saying that, you know, it doesn't touch the people of today, we must understand that history has a way of connecting with people who saw it firsthand. As it's like saying Mahatma Gandhi is today a very big figure, but maybe generations later he might be worshipped like a god. You never know, like Ramchandra ji was, and you know, so you know, this is the thing, that real life stories are meant to take away what the actual experiences were, along with what the person went through, and also the survival aspect, because the survival aspect brings out some beautiful concepts in you, aspects in you, which otherwise when you are not challenged you don't realize they exist, but they come out only then. So I think the takeaway, without reading the book, and I will go back and finish it, is that you know, I would take the book in isolation, the way the author wrote it and what he meant to write, without really talking about what marketing that, I mean, I don't agree there when you talk about marketing, because this is too close to comfort. You've been through something like that. you will obviously write with the feeling. The psychology is the major part, which I appreciate, because as somebody said, it could have been done in a very different manner. But the psychology of it is meant to teach people as to how you can actually challenge yourself when you are challenged in such a big way. So the luck aspect and all that will definitely come into the forefront. But this is an inner battle. It's an, so you have to look at it like that. And if the other people are not getting connected in the generations, we're not connected with Vedanta and a lot of spirituality because our parents didn't teach it, our schools didn't teach it, the political system didn't teach it. So from that point of view, getting closer to home for the younger generation, it only means that they have to be educated. Because everybody has a human touch to learn.
What I feel, Alagu, if your journey as a soul requires you to get it, it comes. It comes to you. It calls to you. I grew up in an environment just totally westernized. My mother is clueless about all this. She thinks it's all mumbo jumbo. But I'm deeply into this because this was my call. And so I am a classic case of it's not about the environment and all will help you on, but it is each soul's journey. And this book for me was about an individual soul and individual search for meaning. Okay, I understand what you said about society. And frankly, I know youngsters who are amazing, who are giving back to society, who are doing so much, who are looking at meaning. I'm seeing a totally different set of youngsters.
You're right there. I've seen youngsters who are fantastic in today's world. I agree with her totally.
I'm using Australian youngsters.
Yes.
We need to have
But today's youngsters are waking up. They're really awakening in a very big way.
Different type of people.
So we need to see everything. It's very important to see this, and say, oh really?
Yes.
And then say, oh, I also saw something different.
Yes.
That's how our book club works.
Yes.
And look at the knowledge dissemination. That is also huge.
No, they're good, but what I thought was, what I didn't like was these kids going there as a school excursion. Jewish people all wearing their school uniform, some of them Orthodox. Having iPod, I think, the teachers usually say silence. And the people there, they let me videotape the whole thing because they said, it was said no strictly. I said, see, I'm coming from India, and the man, he said something like, he said,
that notice of the elders? Yeah.
no, but they said no videography, and I asked. He said, this person is the only person in the group. He was telling my guide, this man's the only one who is interested in Holocaust. These other fellows want to have a beer. They all went up to have a beer, and they let me photograph. And many of the other people resented my photograph. I got about 40 photographs. This is when you see, and in Australia, I met my boss was a transit camp man. So he nearly went, but he was baptized a Christian and then got away with it. He was a sort of Nankevaste Jew. And he had all the Jewish traits, but he was a rich man and he bought only German cars, like he said. He'll say, I won't buy, but he'll buy. But I met some real, honest to God, they won't talk about the experience. Because they were so, that time itself they were sidelined. They were lost in Australia, and you go into the Australian Museum, because and there it will be say donated by with loving. And there's one poignant photo, a bunch of little shoes taken from the children. It's called the children's room. They said so many million children were kids, and it was a tribute, done by a Sydney, long forgotten Sydney.
So I just thought, where will the companion
He's an Indian guy.
So now let's now have everybody who
No, I didn't talk.
Oh, sorry.
No, I didn't talk. Yeah, so since everybody said everything, I just want to say that I kind of, because of my profession, I kind of looked at it in a way of how logotherapy might be used, because I don't know if all of you remember, it was there in Ikigai also.
Yes.
He talked about logotherapy.
Yes.
And so it is just about, even when we are talking about counseling patients, a lot of times, one of the few things when they're anxious about something, especially when they come with anxiety or when they are upset about something, we first ask them, you write down the situations that you are upset about. And then we ask them, do you think the situation, you can change the situation? And most times they can't change the situation. So our first advice is that you can't change the situation, you need to change your reaction to it. Because that's the only way it's going to, help in any way. Otherwise your anxiety is just going to get constantly going
up and up, and then because medication is not always the first choice. You always have to figure out whether there is something else that you can do. So I just kind of looked at it from that point of view also. And Troy doesn't make too much sense to me. So this guy makes more sense.
My psychiatrist brother-in-law thinks I'm nuts. He says that you're only becoming nuttier by the day.
Anand is a psychiatrist, he should know.
That's what my sister says. My sister